For years, South Africans have lost mobile data without ever using it, quietly expiring in the background. Now that's set to change. The Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, ICASA, has introduced new regulations that will, from early next year, ensure that unused mobile data will roll over instead of expiring, a move widely seen as a win for consumers. But this decision raises bigger questions. Will it truly make data more affordable and transparent, or will mobile operators pass on the new costs elsewhere? Telcos say implementing data rollover comes with technical and financial challenges, while ICASA insists the move balances consumer protection with a competitive, innovative sector. So let's unpack what this landmark development means for users and the mobile industry. I'm joined now by tech and business journalist Mudiwa Gavaza, who has been closely tracking all of those developments. Good afternoon to you, my friend. Let's start with just what's been the rationale? A few days ago, I was remarking that this phenomenon of data that expires as if it was fresh produce, as if it was dairy, that it has a use-by date or else you lose it. What has been the justification for this system all along?
Well, up until now, one of the big arguments was from the mobile operators was to liken spectrum, which are the frequencies that our telephone and data signals travel over, to a finite resource. And that has been the argument to say, because it's a finite resource, you can't have, just unlimited places for people on the network. And one of the analogies that has been given is the fact that there are certain things that we pay for, use, and then you let go of. An example is parking. You arrive at a shopping center, wherever, you take your ticket, you park in a particular space. Once you're done with that parking, you go. That parking is not held in perpetuity, in the same way that when you get onto a bus, when you get onto an aeroplane, you buy your seat, you travel to your destination, and then you let go of that usage, on the aeroplane. So that has been the argument from the telecoms operators, that when a person is accessing the internet, voice, and all of that, it's like a place on the network, the so-called information highway. So we can't have you just having a lane, all to yourself in perpetuity. You almost use your lane for a certain period of time, let go of that, and then it continues. And that's been part of the rationale around the expiring of bundles.
The so-called use it or lose it principle. So take me through what ICASA is proposing then, these regulations, and how wide-ranging and thoroughgoing are they?
Well, I think that's where it's really interesting, because we are talking about all the different bundles, but there is an exception to how people will be able to do this. It's set to come into effect in 2027, and the exception will be for bundles that are for 7 days or less, excluding uncapped, free, and promotional bundles, right? So those groups of bundles are not part of this rollover that we're talking about. So those bundles will not be able to roll over. Those bundles will not be able to be transferred to someone else on a network, all of those different things that are there. So it is quite an interesting space that we do find ourselves in when it comes to all of this stuff, which have been used by mobile operators over the last couple of years, to enact or effect cheaper prices, are still a tool that they'll be able to use. If a mobile operator can make a promotional bundle more attractive to you as opposed to one that can roll over, then it still, falls into that ambit, of data bundles that can expire. So I'm waiting to see how that actually develops over time.
So I think that's an important point, Mudiwa. So as far as these regulations go, I think let's go over it again. The shorter term bundles, so if you buy data for 7 days or data that's part of a promotional bundle, that will continue to expire if you don't use it within those 7 days. This rollover will apply for longer term, medium to longer term, so your 14-day bundles, your 30-day bundles. Do I have that correct?
Yeah. Yes, you have that 100%, and those fall into, the typical bundles that we see people, often buying. That had been the main ones. In fact, when you look at headline, data prices, they often fall and talk about the 30-day, bundles out there. So the fact that promotional bundles have grown in popularity over the last couple of years, sort of feeds into that. Hence why we are waiting to see what the balance is going to be once the legislation comes into effect.
I don't imagine, Mudiwa, that the telcos, the telecommunications companies are thrilled by all of this. What's been the industry response, but also what is our expectation for what this will do for data affordability?
Well, there's been a couple of, interesting responses, because you can imagine that something like this has actually been in the works for, we're going to call it almost 11 years now, trying to align, your end user license agreements and telecoms regulations to the Consumer Protection Act. Has been something that's been going on, I believe, since 2015. And over the years, there's been a lot of debate, and some of the submissions, if I can, quickly refer to you, you have the likes of, MTN, that have come across, to say, well, did you guys do a regulatory impact, assessment before you put this into place? And you have ICASA then coming in and saying, actually, we felt, there was really no need, to do, something like that. MTN has also argued, to say that, to ask, to say, did the regulator actually identify a market failure that requires, this proposed amendment as a remedy? And then we've also seen Vodacom, in its submissions, talking about the fact that the proposed measures, were contrary, to South Africa's legal framework, and that ICASA actually demonstrated that, they are necessary, or hasn't, done so, and that, that they are least costly and least intrusive way, to achieve the objectives that they say they have. So lots of lengthy, submissions that have come through.
Yeah.
On my point around promotional bundles, one of the reasons why we pointed it out in a piece that we recently did for Business Day was because the likes of Telkom were asking, for clarity from the regulator to say what is a promotional bundle, because they felt some of the definitions were too broad and that, things will encroach. So ICASA does find itself in an interesting place, because on the one hand, you need to be taking care of the consumer and make sure that the cost to communicate is cheaper, but at the same time be able to have some type of measures in place that are pro-competitive and that will allow your operators to still compete. Hence why your promotional bundles, your 7 days, etc., have been left alone, because those are being seen as a way that operators will still be able to compete. But on the longer term bundles, that's where they're saying, okay, we can do something for the consumer to help them out.
Lastly, Mudiwa, when we have these kinds of conversations, issues around network investment, cost structure, and revenue structure are never far off. Are we seeing those being raised in the midst of this debate?
Yes, that's actually been, one of the things, because people that are against, some of these proposals, were arguing to say, oh, well, you might end up having some of these costs, being passed on, to the consumers. What is it going to mean, for network investment? However, if we were to just look at the top two operators, that is Vodacom and MTN, both those networks have such wide, network coverage, that I think for the next, at least in the short term, people would be good from a network point of view. barring people that are perhaps in, the remote areas, you're still able to make a call, but the quality of your internet service, that, might be a little bit tough. So I would say network infrastructure is, pretty good. At the same time, your mobile operators are also dealing, in certain aspects where they've got these extensive networks, but they're still, looking for ways to actually fill those networks with traffic, because in certain instances they have spare capacity, which is why you end up having deals in place where they can have telecom in instances where it doesn't have network infrastructure, uses, Vodacom in certain instances, MTN in others. Cell C got rid of its network infrastructure and it completely uses Vodacom and MTN's infrastructure. So I would say from a capacity point of view, for the foreseeable future, we should be good from that point of view. 10 billion rand being spent between Vodacom and MTN both to expand their networks on an annual basis. And I think for the foreseeable future, we should be good.
Thank you for your time there. That's Mudiwa Gavaza, who is a senior tech and business journalist. You should follow his work, by the way. He actually does stellar work for the Arena Group, in particular Business Day. He reports extensively on issues to do with the telecommunications industry.